Guten Tag, everyone. Yeah, good to see you. We are going to be talking today about the origins of the World War I. Now, if you remember, we've been talking about the progressive movement and the age of imperialism and the Gilded Age. And the times that we've been talking about primarily has been running from about 1870 with the Second Industrial Revolution all the way up to about 1914 with the age of imperialism and the progressive era. Now we're going to start taking a look at the time 1914 to 1920. And the 1914s to the 1920s, we're going to look at all of this because we need to see a bit more about this business regarding the World War I. And the World War I happens from 1914 to the 1918. And the fun thing about the World War I is that America doesn't get involved until the 1917. So we have to understand why the world goes to war, and then why does the United States not join until 1917. So that's the plan anyway. Now, hopefully we should be able to at least make it pretty clear as to why these nations would go on this war, and how America is going to get involved, even though it's going to be 3 years after the war starts. So that's the plan anyway. Let's see what that's going to look like. So we've got a couple of key essential questions that we're going to be covering here today. We're going to be taking a look at what causes nations to go to war. Specifically, we're going to be looking at ideas. We're going to be looking at alliances. We're going to be looking at arms races and something called self-determination. At its beginning, here is what the world looks like in 1914. It's a world of empires, right? Let's not forget that fact. It's a world full of empires where the whole world has already been colonized. I want to zoom in and focus just on Europe. You have a couple of really big key players here. England has a huge empire. France has a huge empire. Germany has a huge empire. The Empire of Austria-Hungary has lots of land, as does an empire we've only mentioned in passing, the Ottoman Empire. It's kind of an area that we would now call the modern Middle East. In this country right here, we now call Turkey. Either way, you've got a bunch of empires. Even the Russians have their own empire at this point in time. And these empires are going to find themselves on a crash course for war. Why? Because, let's not forget, they've been competing all this time for resources around the world, and they've carved up most of the world. There's no place left to go. So we're going to start to see a kind of a push as more and more and more of these countries, they've got nowhere else to expand. They have to figure out a new way to survive. So let's start with ideas. The first big idea we need to understand is the country of Germany. Germany wants to unite all German-speaking people. Well, what's the big idea about that, right? They have their own freaking country, right? Zippity-doo-dah. Why do they have to worry about uniting even more people? And the answer there is that there's actually a good number of German people who don't live in Germany. There are German people who live here in the east coast of France, or the eastern part of France, and there are many Germans who live here in what we would now call Poland. But they're not part of the German Empire. Germany wants to include them in their empire, but those other countries, the Russian Empire, which has the Germans here, and the French Empire, which has the Germans here, they don't want to give that up. So, understandably, they're going to object when Germany starts to make claims that the German people in France and in Russia should belong in Germany. That's reason one. Reason two. An arms race begins in Europe. As these different empires become stronger and stronger and stronger around the world, they start to compete more and more and more with each other, particularly when it comes to who is going to be able to maintain the strength of their empire over time. This map shows millions of dollars in spending on the military in American dollars for years leading up to the war. And what I want you to see is that in every instance, nations are increasing the amount they spend on preparing for war. From $308 million in 1908 to $368 million in 1913. $248 million for France in 1908 to $321 million. 84 to 193. 396 to 573, 133 to 206. And you can see it. I mean, you can see the dramatic rise in spending in all of these countries throughout Europe. This is dangerous because when you have an arms race, it creates competition. And at some point, the tensions between these countries rise because the bigger Germany builds its army, the larger France will build its army. And when you have two nations fighting over who should live in what country, and you have these large armies, if somebody makes a wrong move, we could end up with war. When you add in the fact that all the major empires of the world are doing this at the same time, it's going to get really, really, really stressful. It's going to become even more stressful for the countries of the world because what you're going to be seeing here are those countries in the world beginning to ally with each other. Specifically, what you're going to see in terms of allies are two groups of allies moving forward. One of them is going to be called the actual allies. Those countries here, in kind of the gray area that I'll be coloring in, become what we know as the allies. Those are the big three. There's three big allies. The others become known as the Central Powers. And the Central Powers include those here that you see that I'm coloring in this orange color. Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire. Those countries together will start to take what you can really call sides. They'll be on the same team together, and their goal is to protect each other. So if somebody attacks Russia, then Britain and France will help them out as the allies. If somebody attacks Austria-Hungary, then Germany and the Ottoman Empire will help as the Central Powers. So we have nations of the world, very powerful, taking sides. We have nations of the world, very powerful, dramatically increasing their military. And we have nations of the world, huge empires, getting into arguments about who should live where, particularly when it comes to the Germans. So we've got a lot of potential sparks to ignite a powder keg here, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Before we start to talk about that powder keg, though, I want to add one thing, and it's here above my head. It's called self-determination. This fourth idea or fourth concept is really going to be playing at the heartstrings of a couple of these different empires. The Russian Empire is going to have an issue with self-determination. The Ottoman Empire is going to have a problem with it. And so is the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So if we had to kind of sit back and say, okay, so what empires are really going to be hurt by this? I think the three that you would want to take a look at here include Austria-Hungary, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire. These three nations are going to really be hurt by self-determination. And the idea of self-determination is in this slide that you can see up here in the upper left. The idea here is that people who come from the same background, who have the same culture, that have the same language, that have the same shared history, those people have a right to their own country. So let's just take a look here real quick again at these three nations. And in particular, I want to focus on Austria-Hungary. Let's pretend I'm cutting Austria-Hungary out with my lightsaber. Zzz, zzz. All right, so I cut it out. There it is. And I'm throwing it on this slide right here that I'll be blowing up. And on the right-hand side now, you can see Austria-Hungary. And inside Austria-Hungary, there are tons of different people who share their own identity. In red are Germans. In blue are Czechs. These are Poles. These are Ukrainians. These are Hungarians. We've got a couple of Italians down over here, and some Serbs, and some Croats, and some Romanians. But they're all pushed together in one country. I know that doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it actually is when those people don't want to be there. Like, imagine America that had just the British people right in the 13 colonies, and we didn't want to be there, and we rebelled against our very powerful empire. Now, take the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is packed with what, like 5, 10 different groups of people who have their own desire to be apart thanks to self-determination, and they're going to want to rebel. They're going to want to create their own country, and that's going to lead us to yet another reason for war. So to recap really quick, we've talked about ideas, German-speaking people together. We've talked about an arms race, countries, empires building up their militaries. And we've talked about alliances, countries taking sides because they are afraid of war. Now we're adding internal tensions inside those countries like the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire, where those countries themselves are almost self-destructing. Let's add in a fifth reason for war: crisis. And there's a couple different crises that happen. And crises are like the spark. Imagine you have like a puddle of gas and you know, it's just there. Well, that's flammable, but it's not dangerous until someone drops a spark on it. That's a crisis. The one I want to talk about right here involves this guy over here on your left. That guy there in the funny-looking hat, that's Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He's the leader of Austria-Hungary, this country up here that's pulling itself apart at the seams. And one of the groups in that country that I have my lightsaber on right now, the brown, the Serbs are angry at Archduke Franz Ferdinand for not granting them freedom. So Archduke Franz Ferdinand, in an attempt to kind of make those people be friendly to him and like him better, goes on a visit to their big city called Sarajevo. And when he's there, a group of terrorists called the Black Hand. The Black Hand, they send agents after him. And one of the agents, this guy down here, Gavrilo Princip, he's successful. He assassinates Archduke Franz Ferdinand. That is the beginning of World War I. The very first declaration of war in World War I comes when Austria-Hungary, right here, declares war on a part of people in here, or a country that's right here, called Serbia. Remember, Austria-Hungary has Serbs living in it. See that? Here's the Serbs. I have my lightsaber on them, and they're right next to Serbia. And the Serbian people assassinate Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. And that's going to be the very, very, very first declaration of war in World War I. So recapping what we have so far, we've got Germany wanting to gain control of some of the German-speaking people in France and in the Russian Empire, wanting to make them a part of their country, and those two countries saying no. We've got all of the nations on here pretty much engaging in an arms race, each one building their military, trying to larger than the others. And we've got nations taking sides. The Central Powers here in red, and here in green we have the Allies. We add into that the fact that some of these nations are experiencing crises of self-determination, where they're pulling themselves apart from the inside. Nations like those here that I'm giving a yellow highlight to. Nations like Russia pulling itself apart at the seams. The Ottoman Empire and Austria-Hungary pulling itself apart at the seams because of self-determination. That self-determination leads to our first crisis of World War I, when this little teeny tiny country down here that I'm going to highlight, highlight it in blue, when this little teeny tiny country down here called Serbia encourages some of its Serbs in Austria-Hungary to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand using the group the Black Hand. And then we have Austria-Hungary declaring war on Serbia. So, then what happens? How does this whole thing play out, right? Because one nation declares war, big Austria-Hungary declares war on little tiny Serbia, so then what's going to happen? Well, it's kind of like dominoes. We know that Russia, Britain, and France all form the Allies, and we know that the Central Powers are Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Ottoman Empire. So what happens after Austria-Hungary attacks Serbia? Serbia is going to ask Russia for help. When that happens, Austria-Hungary says, holy crap, they just asked a member of the Allies for help. If Russia gets involved, France and Great Britain are going to get involved too. So Austria-Hungary says, I got to call on my friend, Germany, which then makes Russia definitely ask France for help. And then now you have all of these players engaging on the border, on the brink of war. You've got Austria-Hungary and Germany attacking Serbia and France, and you've got everyone. It's going crazy. The British even say, you know what? We're going to sit this out unless the Germans are going to enter Belgium, neutral, tiny little Belgium, to attack. So if you took a look here at that map that I had before, that map of Europe, what we're going to actually see here is going to be Austria-Hungary attacking. Let me see if I can just do this via shapes to make life a little bit easier for us. Austria-Hungary attacking Serbia. And then you're going to see Serbia saying, "Oh God, Russia, help me please." And so then Russia is going to attack Austria-Hungary. Germany is going to come back, and Germany is going to say, "You're not going to do that," and attack Russia. Then France is going to say, no, you don't. You're not doing that. France is going to attack Germany. And then Germany is going to be like, I'm not putting up with that. I'm going to attack France back. And they're going to go through the little teeny tiny country of Belgium to do it. Right here. The little teeny tiny country of Belgium. And that's when Great Britain says, dude, if you invade that little teeny tiny country that's nothing to do with this, I'm coming over there and I'm going to whoop up on you. So it's almost like dominoes. One country does it, then the other country does it, then the other country does it in terms of declaring war. And we end up with this huge, gigantic mess where all of the major powers in the Allies and all of the major powers in the Central Powers are now at war. The only country that we haven't mentioned here, the United States. What are we doing? We're on the other side of the world. We're like over here. We're like, I don't want any of that. You, Germans, French, Russians, British people, no thanks. You keep your war over there. We've got this big old ocean between us. No need for us to get involved. That's your business over there. Besides, we're Americans. We like to make money. And war is profitable for business. Oh, yes. So we start to sell goods to both sides. We start giving loans to the British and to the French and to the Germans. We start selling weapons and supplies to the Germans and the British and the French. So we start making mad money selling to everyone. You guys want to do the killing? You go right ahead. I'm going to make some serious bucks selling to all of you. Britain sees this and says, you know what? We're not going to put up with this. We're going to do something called a blockade. You can see it on the map that I just put down here. They're going to blockade the only access American ships have to Germany. And they're going to say, you can't go there. Sorry, Americans, you're not able to trade with Germany. You can only trade with us. That's the way it's going to be. If you try to trade with Germany, we're going to sink you. That's what's going to happen. We're going to shoot your ships. And so the Americans are left only able to trade with Britain and not Germany. The response to this blockade, in which the British are searching for contraband, like weapons or other kinds of military materials, the Germans respond to this by saying, really want to play that game, Britain? Fine, we'll play that game. I'm going to surround your entire island with submarines and any ship. I don't care if it's a passenger ship. I don't care if it's a cargo vessel, a military vessel. You bring that ship here, down it goes. Sunk. This kind of real crazy submarine warfare, it's going to send the Americans closer to war. Because what's going to happen is a passenger ship called the Lusitania, and it does have some ammunition on it, but primarily a passenger ship, it's going to get sunk by the Germans, and it's going to kill 128 Americans. That's actually going to kill over 1,000 people, but it's going to kill 128 Americans. And President Wilson's going to give this speech, and he's going to say, you know what? German submarines can't do that. You can pay for property, but the lives of innocent people, you can't pay for that. You got to stop doing this. You got to stop sinking all these ships. The other big thing that's going to send us to war, in addition to the sinking of these ships, is going to be something called the Zimmermann Telegram. Because, newsflash, the Germans aren't going to stop sinking ships. They're going to keep it up. And it's going to continue to push us towards war. But the final straw, the one that breaks the camel's back, that's going to be this thing called the Zimmermann Telegram. When America intercepts this little secret, and that secret is a German official named Arthur Zimmerman sends a telegram. It's coded. You can see it down here, just a series of numbers. We intercept it. We crack the code. And what we discover it says is that Germany wants Mexico to ally with it and attack America. Right? Mexico is asked to ally with Germany and attack us. In exchange, the Mexicans are going to get California, or they're going to get Texas, they're going to get New Mexico, Arizona, part of California, if they join Germany as an ally. When we see this, that's the last straw. America will declare war in April of 1917, and we're going to flow over to Europe, and now we're definitely on one side of the equation. So we tried to be neutral, we tried to stick it out, we tried to be on both sides, sell to both sides, but it doesn't work. Thanks to the blockade by the British and then the submarine warfare by the Germans, and so we're driven off into war. And we'll talk more about this in class tomorrow, but for now, I think it's a good summary.